Welcome to Impact on Ohio, the series where we highlight Ohio leaders from the State House to the U.S. Capitol. We sit down with dedicated public servants to tackle the issues that matter most to Ohio businesses. Brought to you by the Ohio Chamber of Commerce, the state's leading business advocate. We aggressively champion free enterprise, economic competitiveness, and growth for the benefit of all Ohioans. Stay tuned for insightful conversations that will shape the future of Ohio's business landscape. Get ready for Impact on Ohio, where business meets leadership, because Ohio's success is everyone's success. Hi, I'm Steve Stivers from the Ohio Chamber of Commerce, and welcome to the Impact on Ohio video series. We're lucky today to have the Senate President Rob McColley joining us. Thank you, Mr. President, for joining us today.
Yeah, very happy to be here, Steve.
Great. Well, the Senate's got a lot of stuff going on, and you've been the Senate President now for 3 months, a quarter of the year. And you guys have a lot going on. Can you talk about what your priorities are for the 136th General Assembly in the Senate and what you hope to do to make Ohio better?
Well, a lot of our priorities are outlined in Senate Bills 1, 2, and 3. So Senate Bill 1 deals with higher education reform. That's something that we passed out of our chamber. It's passed out of the House and already been signed to the governor in the first 3 months. And that really deals with trying to recenter our higher education system on educating the best students, trying not to let the tail wag the dog, trying to get outside of what really we've seen as ideological capture at our universities, try to get back to the basics. And so that passed. That was something that was very important. Senate Bill 2 is our energy bill, and Ohio is at a crossroads right now, or a fork in the road, where it can decide, really, given the fact that we now have tailwinds rather than headwinds coming from Washington, D.C., we can capitalize off this moment and utilize the natural resources that we have right underneath our own soil in the state of Ohio, and really put a sign up at the border that says, we are open for business and we're open for natural gas generation. We want to take control of our energy future, and we want to be aggressive in trying to bring more natural gas generation here to the state, not only for our distribution utilities to use on the grid, but also for companies to invest in their own power generation behind the grid, which I think has the ability to be transformative for our state and our economic future.
That's great. Well, I don't know if you saw the Bureau of Labor Statistics numbers in February. Ohio created more jobs than any state in the country. Congratulations. That's a big deal. I think it's a recognition of the things that have been happening in Ohio. You've been involved in economic development a long time, both as a local official and then at the state level in both the Ohio House and now the Ohio Senate. What are your priorities around economic development, and what do you think we should be doing to focus on the economic policies that can move Ohio forward?
Whenever you're talking about economic development, first and foremost, you're trying to retain the businesses that you have in the state. You're trying to make those businesses feel welcome here. You're trying to make sure they have the tools and resources they need to grow. You're also looking at what can you do from a competitive aspect to attract more businesses to the state of Ohio, whether it be a relocation effort or a new investment in the country that you're trying to compete against other states. When you do that, I always look at the 4 legs of the stool. Number one, you got to have a good tax and regulatory environment. That's something that we have done, or we've strived to do over the last 10 years or so. When I joined the legislature in 2015, we had 7 income tax brackets. The highest was 7.5%. Now we have 2 income tax brackets. The highest is 3.5%, lowest 2.75%. And we've tried to cut regulations along the way as well. Number 2, you need to have a really good talent stream. We've invested an awful lot of money in our community colleges and the Tech Cred program, but we're also lucky to have more than our fair share of good quality higher education institutions that, given the right tools and having the right focus, can really add to the amount of talent that we pump out and we hopefully keep here in the state of Ohio. Number 3 is you need to have an abundant supply of water. Ohio is very fortunate to have an abundant supply of water. It's becoming increasingly more important as you see across the country. You look out west where states are either running out of water or they simply don't have enough water to grow at the rate that they have been growing. And it's putting an awful lot of pressure on those areas of the country. That's something we can use as not only a retention but an attraction effort for much of the economic development opportunities we're going to have as a state. And then finally, the energy that we already talked about. you have to have an abundant supply of affordable, dispatchable, reliable energy. And we have an opportunity with some of the policy changes we're making right now to really set the tone, not just for the near future, but for the next several decades.
Those all sound really great. And you talked a little bit about workforce. That was the number one issue. It's still one of the top issues we hear from our members. Some of the concern is eased a little, but it's still really important for the future. Can you talk about how private sector workforce development might fit in to your view of workforce development? A lot of our members pay a lot of money to do training after people are hired or during the process of having somebody employed. How does that fit into your view of workforce development, and how can the private sector be part of the solution?
Well, one thing that I always say when I'm meeting with both community college and university presidents is we have to be very clear and very mindful of what is our value proposition of higher education in the state of Ohio. What can we do to go out to a student and a set of parents and say, this is what your child or this is what your loved one is going to get in exchange for their time and resources at our higher education institution. But that also flows to the private sector as well. Naturally, we want these people to stay here. We want them to be employed here. We want them to help grow our economy, and we want our businesses to be able to thrive off that talent stream that I referenced earlier. And in order to do that, these higher education institutions need to understand what is it that is needed by the private sector. And so you look at community colleges, I believe, are really, really good at this. They're able to be a little bit more nimble than our four-year institutions. They're able to go to a lot of manufacturing plants and say, okay, how many students do you need? What kind of curriculum do you need? And in some cases, they're able to actually offer that curriculum and that training on site. That's being responsive, that's being customer service oriented, that's being a part of the solution as we go forward for workforce development. But that also extends up to the four-year education side of things. I've been pleased to hear a number of university presidents who are embracing this philosophy in their own way to be able to say, I had one university president in particular who said, if you look at our overall faculty head count, you'll notice it's largely unchanged over the last 10 years. However, if you dive a little bit deeper and you look at the exact programs and colleges that they're in, you'll notice our arts and sciences faculty, where people are having a hard time getting jobs, especially good paying jobs, those numbers of faculty are going down, but we're adding more faculty to our allied health sciences, our business school, our construction and engineering disciplines, areas that are going to produce high-paying jobs and that are in high demand in the economy right now. That is a market-based response from our higher education institutions, and it doesn't happen without a dialogue occurring between the private sector and the public sector.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up. So let's take that down a level instead of up a level. There's about 600 high school or school districts in Ohio, more high schools than that. And all those school districts are required to have a business advisory council. About 2/3 of them actually contract that out to the Education Service Center instead of doing it themselves. Do you think we should look at that? Because I feel like that makes the school district a little less aware of what business in their community wants. And should we maybe say this is something, and nobody's looking for new mandates on schools, but 50% of high school students go on to higher education. About 50% don't. And if the school district leadership doesn't know what's going on in their local economy and isn't really close to the business community, I feel like they might not be doing the stuff to get the 50% that are not going to college ready for the jobs that are in their community. Is that something that the state should maybe look at? And I'm not asking you to make a big announcement here, but it seems like that might be a disconnect at the local level or the K through 12 level of education.
Yeah, it's something that I think when it was put in place, it was well intentioned, but maybe didn't have the teeth to follow through on it. The businesses or rather the school districts that want to do this sort of thing, they embrace it. They embrace the change. They embrace the feedback. They embrace the criticism in some cases from the business community as opportunities to improve their model and improve their relationship abroad within the community. What we're seeing, though, is in many school districts' case, they look at this as either an inconvenience or they simply can't find the people who are willing to serve. Now, can they not find them, or are they unwilling to go look for them is part of the question. So it is probably something that's worth looking at. We've had these things for a little bit now, and maybe there's a better way to go about solving the same problem. I know when I was involved in economic development efforts before I joined the legislature, one thing we did is we actually had bus tours that we would take around where we took high school guidance counselors who maybe many of them would admit at this point that they were a little bit mindset static on being biased towards college prep and sending kids off to college, and then everybody else will just figure it out on their own. That's the wrong attitude, because what they realize from going on these bus trips a short 4 or 5 miles down the road is, wow, at that time, 10 years ago, there are $55,000, $60,000 a year jobs that you can get with a high school degree and maybe a 9-month certificate, and people who are willing to train you up and say, if you do well, we'll pay for you to get your associate's degree. And then if you do a little bit more, we'll pay for you to get your bachelor's and maybe even your master's degree. Those are the types of public-private partnerships as well, that it just takes a willingness on the part of the school district to create an environment where that type of feedback is appreciated and encouraged as well from the business community.
Yeah, that's great. Let's stay on sort of that economic development topic for a second. We've had a lot of wins in Ohio. We have won, whether it's in tech, whether it's in agribusiness or advanced manufacturing. What do you think it takes to keep Ohio competitive, not just regionally or in the U.S., but globally? Are we doing everything we need to do to be economically competitive with the best of the bunch in Ohio?
I think we are, and I think there's a mindset shift that's happened a little bit, where we really, in my opinion, have an opportunity to really put our foot on the gas. While we have other states that cannot figure out their energy policy, we're passing comprehensive energy policy that is saying we want cheap, affordable, reliable, dispatchable power that we can use into the future and use as an attraction effort. As we talked about before, the tax and regulatory environment, the water and the talent stream, if we can really hone in on those 4 things, we have an opportunity to improve. We've done a lot of these things over the last 10 years, and it's gotten us to where we are. We would not have gotten Intel or Anduril or anything like that if we had not been incrementally making these changes over the last 10 years. But as you know, getting getting up into those top 10 spots, or
it's harder and harder,
it gets harder and harder the higher you get up. And so it's going to take some bold leadership and maybe even some uncomfortable conversations to be able to keep rising and keep the momentum going.
We appreciate your leadership on that. And you talked about energy, and the Senate energy bill, if I remember right, passed unanimously. Let's sort of talk about bipartisanship, sometimes hard in this environment. You know, the Ohio and the nation have gotten more polarized. How are you building that kind of consensus to get to bipartisan legislation like that?
Well, I think it starts with member relationships. It starts with members who are willing to get in a room and who are willing to talk with the other side and have open dialogue with them, despite the fact that we may not agree on everything. So I give a lot of credit to Bill Reineke. I give a lot of credit to Brian Chavez and some of the ideas that were in there as well. Shane Wilkin has been working on for some time. Yeah. And so really it comes down to having a conversation with them about, look, we can all agree that we want a growing economy. We can all agree that energy is something that is becoming increasingly important. And let's look now at what we can do with the resources we have underneath our own soil to be able to encourage that type of development and growth going forward. You add into that where we're talking about some of the other changes that have been made regarding pro-business changes, making the cost of energy and our entire rate-making system a little bit more transparent, better for the consumer. And I think you end up with a broad bipartisan consensus that what we were doing was the right decision for Ohio.
Certainly working. It's exciting to see that kind of, especially after watching last year in the House, it seemed like nobody could agree to anything. Now, the Senate's always been more calm, but, a bipartisan unanimous bill is a big deal. So congratulations on that. And as we look kind of big picture, what initiatives or industries are you most excited about for driving the economic future of Ohio?
Well, I think with the energy bill that we have passing and allowing people to self-generate on their own, behind their own meter, and really get speed to market with their project, something that might take 6, 7, 8, 9 years, maybe they're able to do it in half that time, is going to be something where we're able to go to these mega projects that we're winning on a fairly regular basis. But we're now able to say, you don't have to worry about whether there's enough power on the grid. You can do your own energy generation. That is going to be the game-changing element of all of this. And I think you're going to start getting, in fact, we're already having companies that are coming and meeting with us who are saying, we've watched what you've been doing with your energy legislation. We're large energy users. We are deploying our capital to the state of Ohio.
Wow.
And we're doing so in a quick time frame because it is all about speed to market. It's all about us being able to have control over one of our biggest cost drivers, that being the energy side of things. And it's also about them being able to say, look, this is a state that we'll feel comfortable is open for business. So I would suspect when you look maybe even back on this 5 years from now, we're going to be able to point to this bill and say that really accelerated the economic growth and some of the major deals that the state of Ohio was getting.
I think the behind the meter stuff's super exciting, and just as a point of validation, I've had some of our members talk to us about the things they're doing. We have big data center developers and buyers, and we also have a lot of energy members, and some of them have been talking, there's a lot of trapped natural gas in the eastern part of our state because the pipelines aren't built, and they're talking about building on-site energy right there where the trapped natural gas is and building data centers there. It's super exciting for a region of our state that's kind of struggled for a while.
And that is that's actually the exact example I was thinking of as we were crafting this bill, is that a lot of these data centers, which I believe are important for the future of our country, and of economic growth here, when you realize how much industry is going to rely upon data and AI and have heavy usage where all of that is concerned, it's an absolute necessity. And if we can have it in Ohio, all the better. But it was putting a ton of strain on our grid, and they were only looking at areas that had major grid operations already, like Columbus. This allows them to be a little bit more flexible on the location. But imagine, if you will, being the school board president of a district in Appalachia who has all the natural gas they need down there. They have the pipeline infrastructure, they have all that stuff. And a data center developer comes in and says, we want to put up a combined cycle natural gas plant, and we're going to cluster 3 data centers around it. And oh, by the way,
$10 billion investment. Right?
Yeah, $10 billion investment with all the property tax revenue and everything that comes with it. If you're that school district, it's going to change the game for you for decades. And so that's the
thousands of families.
That's the type of opportunity we're creating through some of these policy changes.
It's really exciting, and thanks for the leadership on that. So as a relatively young leader who's been successful in business, built a great legal practice, been successful at the local level, and now in the legislature, both in the House and now as Senate President, what advice would you have for young entrepreneurs or young folks who might want to get involved in maybe even public service?
Well, as far as public service is concerned, I think the biggest thing is get involved locally. Try to create relationships at the county party level. Be known as one of the doers at the county party level, somebody who's going to volunteer, who's going to step up when the time is needed. Build that network out. That way, when it comes time to call upon that network, if you are interested in running for office, you have some people who will be in your corner. I think that's important. From an entrepreneurial standpoint, I think there's no better time than now in our history to be an entrepreneur. You have all these resources at your fingertips. It's something that, while it's never easy to be an entrepreneur, you have the ability to network and obtain information quicker and better than you ever have before. And so I would say, if you are an entrepreneur, look at the state of Ohio, try to stay here, try to build a business here that you can grow, and then hopefully employ an awful lot of Ohioans at the back end.
Well, I hope they do, and I hope folks come in. There's 1.5 million Ohioans that grew up here and moved away. We hope a bunch of those come back too, but we want to keep as many entrepreneurs as we can, and we'd love to have new entrepreneurs coming to Ohio. So you've been a leader in the House and now in the Senate, obviously very different bodies, 99 versus 33, but you've also moved up through the process, and you were the number 2 leader in the Senate. Now you're the number 1 leader, the Senate President. How has your leadership style evolved over time, both local government and then as you transitioned into positions of even more authority in the state legislature?
I think the biggest thing is you have to take the opportunity with every leader under which you serve to learn the good and the bad. Learn the things that you want to emulate or build upon. Learn the things that you really don't like, that you don't want to repeat, and try to keep an idea of how that's going to incorporate into your own leadership style. You also have to realize that you can't be exactly like everybody else. You have to be authentic. The only way you can be authentic is if you are yourself. Don't try to be the person before you or the person two people before you or whatever the case may be. Just be yourself. And then finally, you have to do what you said you were going to do. It's that simple, even though it's a lot harder than that, but it's really that simple. It's communicate clearly, follow through, do what you said you were going to do, admit when you were wrong if it comes up to that, and really just be dependable for people. One of the biggest lessons I've learned is that, and this goes for politics generally, but especially when you're in a leadership post, you have to be mindful of your political capital balance. When to spend it, when to accumulate it, and what that balance is, in some cases even within the individual member. And people who burn through their political capital pretty quickly, you know this, they render themselves pretty ineffective pretty quickly. And while it may seem like, hey, they're fighting for us, they're holding their feet to the fire, it's like, no, they're just the loud person in the corner of the room that people stop taking seriously because they had no real solutions, they only had criticisms. And if you're not part of the problem, you're part of the solution, you're part of the problem. Right. And so might be mindful of your political capital balance and try to build it up more than you take it down, obviously.
That's great advice, especially the political capital piece, but all of it. Great advice for folks, whether they want to be a leader in business or a leader in government or politics. So how do you see the collaboration between business leaders and policymakers in Ohio evolving in the future, whether it be chambers of commerce or just business people in general? You know, how can business people make sure they're engaged and involved with policymakers, because the decisions that policymakers make impact the business climate in Ohio?
I would say, you know, at least for the larger companies, the ones who are big enough to have their own in-house government relations or external relations people, that's all well and good. You know, obviously it's something that you have to delegate responsibility. But I would urge anybody who is in a leadership role, particularly if you're a CEO, president of a company, to get involved in these trade organizations, in the Chamber, in the Ohio Business Roundtable, in the Ohio Manufacturing Association, in whatever group it is that's representing your interests, because you understand at a greater level what your business's needs and challenges are. You also, quite frankly, are able to get a little bit more influence in the room when a CEO or a president is actively involved in that organization. And so I would urge anybody in that situation to become involved and realize the impact that they can have on these types of conversations, just solely because nobody understands their business as well as they do. Nobody's going to be able to speak with the clarity and the authority on the impact that some of these decisions are going to have on their business better than that individual is going to be able to speak about it. So I would urge them to do that, especially now as we have an ever-changing environment, depending on who's in power in Washington, D.C., and how we're going to react to that at the state level. And we're also trying to figure out ways to make Ohio's business climate better for everybody at the state level. We need that active involvement from people who are experts in their own right as to what's going to make their business more likely to thrive in the state, and we're willing to have those conversations.
Well, thank you, Senate President McColley, for being here. These conversations are always informative. You gave some great advice. We're super excited about the future of Ohio. The Ohio Chamber's goal is to make Ohio a top 5 state in the next 3 years and number 1 in the next 10 years. And we're well on our way. We're ranked number 7 in the CNBC rankings, and it's because of folks like you and literally you and the decisions you've made. Thank you for what you've done to make Ohio better, Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for being on. That wraps up another Impact on Ohio video series. Thanks for watching. If you have an idea for the Impact on Ohio video series, email us anytime. You can also scan the QR code to take you directly to the YouTube page and watch Impact on Ohio.